We're not talking about like a goal of the tournament here, aside from maybe the added importance.
The first thing I said, Ollie, was that's goal of the tournament. But let's just take a moment to enjoy how wafer thin the margins are in football between it's a disgrace, it's all over, and it's coming home.
Let's not start calling a manager who's had one of the most successful England managerial careers to date a man out of depth, because he's clearly not.
Hello and welcome along to week number 3 of Not Another Sports Pod with myself, David Windsor, and Mr. Oliver Wilson. Ollie, hello and welcome. I want to dive straight in, mate. No chit-chat, nothing before. Let's go straight in with the good stuff, because England, thanks to a Jude Bellingham, well, mainly thanks to a Jude Bellingham overhead kick in the last second of the last 16 clash against Slovakia, saw England qualify for the quarterfinals of Euro 2024. Ollie, I'm sure we're going to slag off England, of course, rightly so. Large parts of the performance and the campaign so far have been pretty much a disgrace, right? But let's just take a moment to enjoy how wafer thin the margins are in football between it's a disgrace, it's all over, and it's coming home. Let's just enjoy how ridiculously comically thin that is. And you know what? By extension, how thin like life can be at times. Like one WhatsApp message, one chance encounter, one moment can change things around. Not to get too existential on a Monday morning, but that is football and that is life. And for a brief moment, it was utterly beautiful.
So football is life, is what you're saying. All right.
Exactly.
Okay, move on. Right, let's talk about the rest of the quarterfinals then. We've done
For the deep thinkers amongst us, Ollie, yes.
I mean, I don't know if you were... I don't really tweet, but I don't know if you read Twitter before coming on here and what I put, which was 93 minutes of England are a disgrace, Bellingham needs to go off, all this rubbish, 96 minutes, it's coming home. Because that was the embarrassing factor. These are genuine analysts, or people that consider themselves genuine analysts on Twitter, on social media, etc., who spend 93, 92 minutes of that England game destroying the team. Like, you could even hear in some of the commentary last night, like, people were almost enjoying the fact of how bad it was, of like, oh, right, we're waiting for this now. Can't wait for the debrief. When we get, just go out and we can have this debrief of, like, Southgate's a disgrace. And I was thinking about the narrative that it was going to be. People calling Gareth Southgate out of his depth at this level and things like that. Can we just go back and remember that we've been to a World Cup semi-final and a European Championships final under Gareth Southgate's watch? I know football and sport in general is a very kind of fickle thing where you can completely ignore long built-up histories and suddenly decide a narrative on 90 minutes. We did that with Flamengo during the 2019 Copa Libertadores. And I think we'll do the same here with England if they go on and win it and play okay in a quarter-final and then win a semi-final and a final. And these first 4 games will be completely forgotten about. And it shouldn't be. But at the same time, let's not start calling a manager who's had one of the most successful England managerial careers to date a man out of depth. Because he's clearly not. Because he's been there and he's done that and he's taken us to finals. And he was a whisper-thin margin away from winning a European Championships. A penalty shootout. And that's a lottery at the end of the day. So this kind of huge joy of how bad England were and waiting for that, right, let's stick the knife in on Southgate, was so obvious yesterday on like football Twitter, if you will. And then Bellingham scores. It's like, firstly, it's the greatest goal you've ever seen at the Euros. Unbelievable. The bicycle kick, the techers on that. Like, it's not Rooney against City. It's not like Ronaldo-esque. It's a lovely goal. It's a great finish. It's an inspired move. But we're not talking about like a goal of the tournament here, aside from maybe the added importance.
The first thing I said, Ollie, was that's goal of the tournament. As soon as it went in. Because, well, like everything, you need the full context, right? If England go on and win it, I think it's goal of the tournament, because the greatest goals potentially aren't just the moment themselves and the technique and the brilliance and the uniqueness. It's also like the added significance, right? I think those two things can run in parallel.
So if Italy won the tournament, I know they're out obviously, but if Italy had gone on to win the tournament, would you have turned around and said Matthias Zaccagni's goal against Croatia is the goal of the tournament?
No, because it's not as good as a goal as Bellingham's.
Oh, it's a lovely goal, that. I don't know.
It is, but Bellingham's is more unique.
Maybe.
It's why, Ollie, on a massive tangent now, you remember was it Demba Ba's goal for Newcastle where he hits it like outside of his right boot? I don't know if you remember this
Yeah,
one.
yeah,
Or
against
Papa
Chelsea.
Cisse.
No,
It was
Papi
Demba Ba.
Cisse, wasn't it?
Yeah, Papa Cisse. It's like it's one of the weirdest goals I've ever seen, and that's why it's one of my greatest goals. It's like the Bergkamp against Newcastle with that trick that I basically have never seen anyone do at a very high level like
Yeah.
since then. So yeah, for that reason, obviously people have done overhead kicks before, but you take the point. But isn't I take exactly what you mean about how ridiculous it is between people slagging off Southgate, and there was 100% a giddy element, which I'm not above, Ollie. Like I'm equally susceptible. The WhatsApp groups were popping off, and you get excited about it. Is this as bad as Iceland? Is it worse than Iceland? Gary Neville could barely contain himself at halftime on ITV, and I thought he actually did. I thought he was fantastic in his analysis there, which I don't always think. But that Iceland comparison was a pretty fair one, but ultimately completely redundant.
There was a line in either the commentary or at halftime. I can't remember what it was, but like, is this going to reflect, like, the word violence got used in relation, like a violent knocking out or something in relation to Iceland, and is this going to be as violent a moment for English football? And I'm sure either volatile was meant to be said, because that would because there wasn't any violence around the Iceland like knockout. It wasn't like we were turning over cars in our towns across the UK or anything. We were just like, oh, well, this is pathetic. We've gone on to lose to a side that we should never be losing to. And in a wonderful way, that's the quintessential English way to go out of any major football tournament. But yeah, there was just, as you said.
It was fun.
It was horrible, though. Because
it was, but
we shouldn't be building this up to fail. I hate it when.
What we do.
But I hate it when the players are saying, oh, isn't it a disgrace the country's not getting behind us, all of the abuse we're getting? And it's like, but you do deserve the abuse because you're playing terrible football. But there's a real happy medium ground between like supporting the team blindly or just waiting for that moment to stick the knife in like some sort of killer, just lying in wait to finally take the jugular. We can have this nice moment where we say, look, I want to get behind them. I wish they played better football and it was easier on the eye. And I don't want to see us going through this tournament scraping and dragging our feet through the grass with 1-0 wins and last-ditch 2-1 wins in extra time every time. But at the same time, I'm not going to just sit here and be ready to unload on Southgate, Bellingham, and anybody else I fancy doing it.
Like, how funny was it, Ollie, how excited people were when he wasn't making substitutions? Like, you could literally see people so happy that it was crazy that he hadn't made any substitutions. It was all written like, he didn't make these substitutions. He's got to make them earlier. Why isn't he making them earlier? It was almost, shaking your fist at the gods. And then when he did make some subs, people were almost disappointed.
That Foden goal that was disallowed is the worst thing to happen because it's convinced him he doesn't need to make subs. That was a genuine line that I saw yesterday. I was like, yeah, okay. I mean, he probably doesn't need to make substitutes because at the end of the day, that is an England side that is littered with high-quality footballers. Mm. He needed to change tactically. He did. That's fine. But mano a mano, you don't need to make changes with that England starting 11 because it's better than the Slovakian starting 11. And if you have faith that those players can eventually produce, you're probably going to. And if you're Gareth Southgate at this point, you're like, well, I'm damned if I do, I'm damned if I don't. If he takes Bellingham off, that goal never happens. Mm-hmm. But let's not forget that 95% of the people on Twitter and social media were demanding that Bellingham must go, he's got to come off. And it's like, no, just take the problem out of the way, which was Phil Foden. And I'm not saying Foden's a bad player or anything, just the problem is he's playing in a position that he's not able to play in. I mean, at some points, he's playing like over on the other side of the 18-yard box as more of a right winger alongside Saka. And you're like, what are you doing here? You don't know the position you're meant to be stood in at this point. And as soon as he came off, it looked a little better. We went to 3 at the back with 2 wing-backs as well. It seemed to have a bit more cohesion in that moment. It wasn't great. Things need to be changed, but I'm not going to sit here and be the guy lying in wait. I'll be annoyed if you're the guy who's further down this tournament just going, yeah, I mean, I'll get my moment. Quarterfinals, I'll get my moment. Switzerland, how are we losing to these chocolate makers or whatever you want to call them, right?
Yeah, I do think it has to be said that this is the most incredible squad we've had since the golden generation. And we are massively, massively underperforming. We might go on and win the Euros, Ollie. It really, really, really doesn't feel like it because we played really poorly for 4 matches and you just face better and better sides in theory as the competition goes on, even though we've got super easy, in inverted commas, side of the draw. So I do think it's worth saying that, I mean, how the fact that Gareth Southgate can't get the best out of the squad is a pretty poor reflection on him. It just is. And I'm sure he'd think that too. He can't be going to bed at night thinking, yeah, you know what? I've really squeezed everything out of Phil Foden and Saka. He obviously hasn't. And these footballers are absolutely exceptional. It's arguably as good as the golden generation. And I do think there's criticism there. One final thing I want to say, because you mentioned the players, I do think they misread the room a little bit. I understand the siege mentality. I understand that everyone's against us. Why don't you just get behind the country? We top the group. We're through, blah, blah, blah. But this isn't like Beckham in '98. Like the media have, well, in some ways, grown up since then. And there aren't effigies of the players. There aren't. We've hopefully moved on a little bit since then. And I don't think some of the criticisms have been that unfair. It's just been we're playing very poorly for the group we've got. So I'm not quite sure. Some of the comments from the players after the match are fair, basically.
I mean, my favourite one was, I think it might have been Bellingham saying, it's so difficult to score against any of these teams. For any nation, it's so hard to find goals in this level of competition. And then you go and put on Spain 10 minutes later, they win 4-1, and it's at a canter, and they're creating chance after chance. It's not that tough. If you have an ability to attack and a bit of movement off the ball and a design structure of attacking football, it looks quite easy. Actually, Spain make it look very easy in this tournament to play really easy on the eye, aesthetically pleasing football that finds goals. So yeah, I have to agree. I don't think the idea.
Whereas Jordan Pickford's beating the ground and screaming to the gods, how could you ever have doubted us and stuff like that? It's kind of amazing. I enjoyed everything about yesterday. Everything. I enjoyed the dark side of it. Of oh no, it's a disgrace. I enjoyed he's coming home. I'm watching it. I'm watching the game in my house, which is in a little village, back where I'm from, and the pubs are just erupting, and yeah, it's. Yeah, it was something special. Any other points on the Euros, Ollie?
I mean,
is it coming home, by the way?
Well, I was about to ask you that. It really might. I couldn't be more apathetic about it at this point because of the first 4 games of the tournament. I've seen half an hour, and then about 30 seconds with that Bukayo Saka goal that was ruled out, and maybe 4-5 minutes. So let's take 35 minutes of entertaining English football so far. And I'm just grown up enough, and I think I'm probably jaded enough from working on games as a job as opposed to looking at it as a fan, to kind of think, I just want the best teams that play the best football to go through and to win competitions. And so if England play fantastically for the next 3 games, great, fine. But at the moment, yeah, I kind of want Spain to win it, I think. Spain or Germany have been the best sides to watch so far. So, yeah, I'd probably go with one of those 2.
All right, that's the football wrapped up.
Oh, just quickly, you're a man who's spent a lot of time in Italy watching Italian football. This Italian side has been called one of the most embarrassing tournament exits of any Italian side. Now, we discussed this with Scotland, obviously, and I think we kind of agreed that was one of the most embarrassing exits of a major tournament that Scotland have ever had. Is this worse for Italy than losing to South Korea at the World Cup in 2002?
No, because I don't think Italy got the players. I don't think they got the players. So it's, of course, you've got the massive historical success that the national team has had and the expectations. But I look at that squad and first 11. I just don't think it's there. So I think it's completely understandable how a half decent side, which Switzerland very much are, by the way, they can pop the ball around, could knock them out.
Yeah, I think Italy have got a youngish squad starting to form. And if they don't pull the trigger early with Spalletti, who I think is a good manager, I think there's a run for 4 years' time, this group of players that they're bringing through. Barella will be that bit older, obviously, but hopefully a bit more wiser to be able to run the show better in the middle of the park. And they need a centre-forward at the end of the day. They don't find goals. They haven't got somebody to stick the ball in the back of the net, and it's what Italy have suffered from for a number of years now. So, yeah, it was just interesting just kind of seeing, there was a lot of Italian football journalists making a few extra bob this week of writing the downfall of Italian football in the same way that, half the English guys had their copy ready to go on the full-time whistle and then had to delete, it's coming home, 3 lines on the shirt kind of thing with 96 minutes to go. And the other thing, I think, just quickly on last night's England game as well, was as soon as the overhead kick went in from Bellingham, there's no doubt that England are going through. It was just one of those moments where Slovakia have clung on, and they're architects of their own downfall in some sense because they invited it, they sat back. They went from trying to be hitting on the counter-attack to having no outlet ball whatsoever. And you cannot do that against big sides in tournament football. And it's a real learning curve for a side like Slovakia, this. because they could and probably should have got away with it yesterday. Like, very good performance in the opening 45, capitalised on a terrible England side, and then did what every lesser nation, lesser club does, is sit back, invite on that pressure, and once it's 1-1, you know England are going to go through. Yeah, it's just going to happen, and Kane pops up, gets that second.
But they were good, weren't they, Slovakia? Like, popped the ball around nicely, confidence to play it on the deck. You know, nation of 5 million people, only a sovereign nation since 92. Like, it's good. Like, it's really good. And the parties that would have happened in Slovakia last night, mate, if they'd have got through in the end. Wow.
But it shows if people know the job that they're meant to do on a football field, and that's what they were. They were a side that turned out. Everybody knew their individual responsibilities, who they're picking up, what they're doing when they're in possession, who's making the run, where we're going with the football. When players know what they're doing, you can form a really good-looking football side, or at least a very solid-looking football side, quite easily, I think. I say that with no managerial experience whatsoever, or real coaching qualifications or anything under my belt. But
give that man the Faroe Islands job and see how he gets on.
I'm just saying, like, if Gareth's going and there's a spot needed, like,
mate, the English Ancelotti.
I do like food as much as Carlo. I reckon I could do it. A couple of glasses of red wine.
No, I meant Southgate's the English Ancelotti,
right.
but the last-minute goal to completely shift the narrative. You know, he just doesn't have all the success. But apart from that,
I thought you were lauding me for a second there. That'd be fantastic.
All right, Grand Prix or tennis?
Let's go Grand Prix. I want to.
All right,
hear about
you need
this.
to explain. So first of all, I sort of forgive I apologise rather to the listeners of Not Another Sports Pod, because the F1 is something that I'll be asking more questions than I have answers for, Ollie. And I watched the 8-minute highlights of the Austrian Grand Prix yesterday, and it was definitely left with like lots of question marks. I used to watch a lot of F1 back in the day, but I don't know, life and time and a list of my priority sports is fallen down the line.
So before you ask any questions, I just want to ask one thing. Those 8 minutes, was it enjoyable, or did you watch it because I'd asked you to watch it, and then you were like, oh, I see what you want to talk about or whatever, or were you like, oh, okay, this is all right? Like, what's...
Yeah, it was good. It was an enjoyable 8 minutes. Like a lot of things in life and on screens, I want it shorter. I want it faster. I want it crazy. Like, that's standard. Like 8 minutes in 2024 is a long, long time. But it was a solid. It's a really well packaged piece, and I think they obviously, whoever's created that highlights package, as with a lot of highlights packages, it's marketed for F1 fans, but it's also clearly there's a structure to it which is meant to reel in like fair weather fans or people that stumble across the page, etc., etc. And the crash coverage was really interesting. And I tell you what, Ollie, hopefully you'll be proud of me for this one. Afterwards, I watched the post analysis of the crash and whose fault it was. So I was sort of going down the F1 rabbit hole. Explain to me, Ollie, what people are allowed to do now. So, like, you obviously are allowed to overtake still, but you're not allowed to ram into someone. And presumably the gap between those two things is where the sport now exists.
Yeah, there's this real... So we're talking about, obviously, Max Verstappen and Lando Norris at the Austrian Grand Prix this weekend, and they're both vying for the lead of the Grand Prix. Norris is closing in on Verstappen, has better tyres, so he's got faster car at that point as well. And Norris keeps on gaining, and then sending these lunges down to the inside of Verstappen a couple of times, and then he sends one around the outside of Verstappen. They make contact. They both end up going out of the... Norris goes out of the race. Verstappen pits, gets a new tyre, but they both had punctures. There was a lot of damage to the McLaren. Ruined the Grand Prix for both of them, and George Russell goes from third place to cruise home for a victory. Now, on-track action is a really fine one to judge, because there are a couple of things that happened during that race which you're not really meant to do. So Lando Norris was going outside the track limits, which is a big no-no, and they're really clamping down on this. You've got a white line that's on the outside of the track. If all four wheels go over that white line, then you do that a couple of times. They give you a warning. If you do it again, you get a 5-second penalty and you get punished for it. And the trouble is that you can gain an advantage by running wider out of a corner, because that's a faster route. You can get the power down earlier, which means you get more traction, which means you can push off. So you can get a faster run out by pushing the limits of the track. And Norris was doing that quite a few times and had been reprimanded for it. So when he had a lunge up the inside of Verstappen, locks his wheel and kind of goes in front of Verstappen at the corner and over the other side of the track, it's then deemed that he's trying to gain an advantage by going off the track. So perhaps Norris ends up with a penalty anyway at that point if they don't have this crash. But what Verstappen's doing during this race is in the braking zone, and this is something that's very dangerous, and drivers have a real kind of, this is a no-no, is he's making a double move. And when they make contact, Verstappen, you get one as the leading car kind of place to put your car to defend at a corner. So you kind of go either inside or outside. And the inside line is slower, but it gives you a better chance of blocking somebody off. And you see Verstappen in the build-up to this corner goes to the right, so he's blocking that inside dive of Norris. But that allows Norris to have the better racing line through the corner, and he's likely then to get past Verstappen on the corner exit. What Verstappen then does, though, under braking, is he drifts the car back left again, which is Norris already committing to the outside. If you do that, you have to give the space for the other driver on the outside. You can't just barge him off the track, let alone make contact. So Verstappen's put a double move under braking right to left and then initiated contact with Lando Norris.
But that's not legal what Verstappen did.
No. That's why Verstappen ended up with a 10-second penalty afterwards, because the stewards looked at it and went, oh, that's a massive no-no. We can't be having this. Does it help Norris at any point that Verstappen gets a 10-second penalty, though? Not really, because Verstappen has made the move, knocked him out of the race. There's too much damage to the car. He's falling down to the back of the grid anyway as he's sat in the pits waiting for them to change tyres, repair, etc. In the meantime, Verstappen ends up with just a puncture, doesn't do as much damage to his car. He's able to get in the pits, get back out, and pick up more championship points, even with a 10-second penalty. So my actual frustration around all of this is the guy that has caused the crash has a much lesser punishment because he's able to stay on track than the guy who, was driving a bit recklessly on a few occasions in the build-up to it. But actually at that moment when they touch, it's not Lando Norris's fault. It's Verstappen veering into him. And he's the one that ends up off the track, knocked out of the race.
And Lando Norris is basically trying to take the gamble to win it rather than finish second, right?
Yeah, he's doing what Formula 1 wants.
He's going for broke, basically.
Yeah, he's doing what Formula 1 want, which is he's providing action. He's got a faster car at that point. He's got better tyres. And he's thinking, you know what? I can beat this guy. If I get past him, I can beat him, and I'll be racing away into the clear air with like 6 laps to go, and I'll be able to get past him and through him and take another Grand Prix victory. So he's trying to do what Formula 1 want, which is make the sport exciting, and he's the one that's punished the most.
So Verstappen's been like, if I'm going down, not quite this, but if I'm going down, you're going down with me kind of thing.
And he's got a history of this as well.
Right.
Like, when he first came into Formula 1, I mean, he had a Formula 1 driver's license before he had a road license. He's been driving in this sport for that long. He's the youngest Grand Prix winner. Unbelievable kind of pedigree with his dad's a former driver as well, obviously, which has kind of helped him get into the sport from a young age. And when he came into F1, he was like a kamikaze driver because he was making 2 or 3 moves under braking. He was willing to knock people, bash them around on the track. And nobody liked overtaking Max Verstappen because everyone was like, he's just a loose cannon. We can't drive around this guy. He's too dangerous. And they actually brought in the not making double moves under braking. And it's kind of known as the Max Verstappen rule because that was what he used to do. And it used to cause so many incidents. Then you get into what happened when he and Lewis Hamilton had that like amazing season. And again, I mean, both of them did it. And there's a slight irony here in that at Silverstone in 2021, Verstappen and Hamilton touch. And it's very similar to this kind of Norris-Verstappen moment we've got now, except bigger stakes because they were 1 and 2 in the championship and it was so close. But it was Hamilton that initiated the contact, knocked Verstappen out of the race. Hamilton gets a 10-second penalty for causing the contact and knocking a guy off the track, but still goes and wins the Grand Prix with Verstappen knocked out of the race, despite the 10-second penalty. His car was good enough to recover from that 10-second penalty and still go and win the Grand Prix. So there's like a bit of irony coming in here that Verstappen's been on the losing side of this sort of thing, and now he's on the winning side of it. Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't seem like the punishments really fit the crime in the sport, but it's also great to kind of have these rogue characters like a Verstappen that I don't want to see drivers being unsafe.
If you create punishments that are so harsh, surely what that does is make people more risk averse, right?
Yeah.
And therefore, as a spectator sport, it kind of diminishes it. Obviously, the safety of the drivers is pretty paramount, but yeah.
You don't want to see crashes, but it's also kind of cool when you see like bits of carbon fiber suddenly pinging away and stuff like that. And it's a phenomenal almost art piece when you see it in like super slow-mo in like 4K resolution these days and stuff. It looks incredible. But yeah, Formula One's got this thing to work out of how do you make sure the right people end up with the right punishment that actually hurts them and that the wronged party ends up with some sort of positive outcome at the end of it. Because at the moment, Norris has done the positive thing of trying to create a race and has come away with absolutely nothing. And it's like, well, what happens here? But it's also good because we've got 2 drivers that want to fight each other. and that are in opposite teams, and they're best mates, or like they're really good mates off track. So it brings in that kind of friendship element as well of like, it's all love and games until, you're fighting over something. Bit like football
And that's
commentary.
also, there's a common ground of like what do people want to see. Like proper F1 fans want to see that, and also fair weather F1 fans want to see that, right? So you've got to find a way to keep that in the sport and not,
And if I'm honest, I don't enjoy seeing like these pro athletes being like best mates with each other. Like, because I want that tenacity to come through. And as a fan, you want to feel it off the pitch as well as on it. Like, Keane and Vieira not looking at each other in the tunnel is one of the best moments as a youngster growing up. Because like, they feel this. There's no like, should we do a jersey swap at the end of the game? Like, nah, let's... And Verstappen, to his, in fairness to him, has that kind of Michael Jordan level of I'll win at all costs. Like, it doesn't matter. I will make sure that I do what I need to do to win. Which, while we balk at it right now, you kind of admire it. In that, it doesn't matter. We're friends, whatever. It doesn't matter. I'm going to go out and I'm going to win, and I'm going to put my car in the best position to win. It's something admirable.
The Keane and Vieira thing's spot on as well, because it's when you see like the pre-tunnel now in big games, and obviously the players play each other so much and they sort of know each other. There's national team crossovers, etc., etc. There's just so much friendliness in those tunnels, and I almost like don't want to see it. Like even if I know that's what goes on, just don't show it to me, because before the game you want to still believe there's some Vieira Keane edge.
Do you think that has come in as well because of the number? Like you'd only have one mascot at the front of a team, right? Yeah. But now you've got all of these children in the middle between the two sides, all the way up the team sheet. So you can't really have like tunnel aggro.
Naming the mascots is not something out on the bingo card.
You can't have tunnel aggro when there's two small children between you and the guy that you kind of want to like,
It's a very, very valid point. Something that I'm sure no one's thought about, Ollie. My natural instinct was just that everyone's just more connected now, so there's just more games. They play each other more often. There's more international crossover. There's more like brand. A lot of these players will be like on the same, and they'll have the same agents, advertising deals, and sponsors, and they came up together in this level, and so they just know each other. And it's harder to be a dick to people if you actually know them, right?
So and you're sort of less inclined
to do that. So like, but the double mascot buffer is definitely something there. Maybe we should make the mascots. Get rid of them all.
Well, you know how like FIFA and football clubs brought in like loud music to drown out crowd noise to try and make a more like pleasing, family-friendly atmosphere. Who knows if the double mascot was brought in for that reason and that reason alone? People saw a tight tunnel at Goodison Park with Liverpool and Everton lined up ready to walk out, and we're like, we can't have this. Get the kids in the way.
It takes the edge off. There's something there for sure. Wimbledon Wimbledon started today, Ollie, on Monday, July the 1st. Let's talk about Andy Murray briefly, because I've come to a conclusion on it.
That he's briefly going to be in Wimbledon.
Say again?
That he's briefly going to be in Wimbledon. So
maybe he won't be. Apparently, he's deciding tonight, based on his injury, whether he can play on the Tuesday, right? So, but I have come to a conclusion about Andy Murray and to sports stars in general, and that is that retiring at your absolute peak is overrated, and that's because if you truly love the sport, if you truly love the craft, you will scrap and you will fight for one last hurrah. And Andy Murray, look, he's injured and he's battered and he's old, and like the critics will come for you, and he just doesn't care, because he's an embodiment of that, and he just wants one last go, and he still believes deep down, potentially like in a deluded state, that he can still do it. His career, Andy Murray's career, essentially at the very top, has been over since about 2017, right? Summer of 2017, it started to wind down. Since then, it's just been injuries, and he's had operations, there's been rehab and failed comebacks. The Aussie Open, even a few years ago, did like a retirement montage for him, like while he was on the court at the end of his match. He still played like 5 years after that. So it's all a bit ridiculous. But I just think Andy Murray is like, he just wants to rage against the dying of the light. And I really, I respect that, because the end of everything is messy and it's crap, basically. The end of like almost everything is like that. And optimizing for this golden, like, goodbye, I don't get it. If you really love the craft, you'll hang on by your fingernails, and it'll be dirty and ugly, and you won't want to watch it, and you'll tarnish your reputation, but you won't care because you just love the sport.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea, but there is also the pushing it too far. You see it so often with boxers, guys, Deontay Wilder, right? Like, he's suddenly losing fights all over the place to much lesser fighters than he's fought for the world titles in the past, and was one of the best boxers of all time, 4-5 years ago. Like, king, heavyweight champion of the world. And now you look at him and you're like, oh, is this going to be like an ugly slide down the boxing rankings as you just get punched in the head too much? Thankfully, tennis isn't that same way. But I think when it comes to injuries as well, like same with Tiger Woods, like he's cobbled together with nails and pins and fake cartilage and everything like that, and he can barely walk 18 holes for 4 days in a row, particularly at like tough courses like Augusta that you kind of, I think it's like the elevation of climbing the Empire State Building on a round at Augusta and stuff. And golf isn't even like a physically taxing sport, as you're so keen to remind me, Dave, on so many occasions. Yet even he can't, like, he can play one competitive tournament a month and that's all he's got, but we still go out and watch him because it's Tiger and he gets the audience. He gets a huge audience still, and he keeps coming out with, I believe I can still win. Of course, I wouldn't be here if I didn't believe I could still win. And you're just yelling at the screen now, like, how do you believe this? In the same way, I would love Andy Murray to come out this week and say, I'm retiring probably at the end of this Wimbledon, right? But I want to keep playing the sport, so I'm going to go out. I don't know if I'm fit enough to play this tennis match.
I'll play doubles.
But I want to go and play a match of tennis because I love tennis. What I don't want to hear is the press conference jargon of, I wouldn't be stepping out on that court if I didn't think I could win the whole thing. No one thinks you could win the whole thing, Andy. It will take a miracle for you to win the whole thing. Everyone needs to go down with polio, I think, for you to be able to win the whole thing at this point. Like, it's just not going to happen.
Nah, but it's... Yeah, go for it, Ollie.
No, and that's where it goes from being like that romantic kind of, I'm still going just because I love the sport, to like, it's still sad if you genuinely think you could win.
But the end of everything's sad. So this is like probably the worst analogy we've had yet on Not Another Sports Pod episode 3, but just stick with me here, Ollie. Like, the end of everything's awful. Like, when you hear people say, I'm going to die at 96 surrounded by my great-grandchildren, it's like, yeah, good luck with that. Mate, you're going to die alone in a nursing home with a cup of cold soup next to you, because that's life. That's the brutality of life. That's like, it's solitary and it's messy and it's horrible, and that's the end of everything. And that's the same, man. Like, people retire in that way. People die in that way. Like, that is just the end. When Ollie Wilson starts wincing at what I'm saying, I know I'm either on the completely the right path or completely the wrong. Did you get what I'm saying? It's like, you can't optimize for that last 1% of your career or your life. That will be messy because that's what it is.
There's very few breakups that end with just, all right, we're just going to walk away. There's no marriage that kind of, oh yeah, no, you have this, I have this, and we just go and that's what we do. Yeah. Yeah. No, I get it. I just, I don't enjoy seeing it because you invest a lot as a fan of emotional time and support into watching these players at the peak of their powers, and it is sad. Maybe it's almost more, I guess, emotionally fitting then, shall we say, that you kind of watch them go from being this like light to, and it kind of brings every great athlete down to earth. Everybody is human. Father Time catches up. Like, even Tom Brady finally hit that, like, 44 years old, where it's like, okay, I can't throw it anymore. There's not enough avocado ice cream in the world that gives me the power to win another Super Bowl. And he's gone on in his sport as long as anybody has ever gone on and maintained a high level of success. And again, you see so many players in every sport kind of just doing a job but not being what they once were. And I think the difference is that there are some guys that can continue to do a role, and that's where team sports helps. Like, you think about like a Modric,
Fabio,
or
like Fluminense.
Yeah, just sit and control things without running. A Darmian Diaz, he's 48 years old and he's not running a single inch of blade of grass on that surface. But what he will do is he can still just sit, read the game, and play with experience. And I guess in an individual sport like golf or tennis, you can't really do that, especially tennis, because it's about that ability to get back and forth across that baseline and be able to read and react to the play in front of you with milliseconds kind of thinking time.
Yeah, sorry, Ollie, just ahead of the Olympics. I remember Steve Redgrave's last gold with Matthew Pinsent and in the rowing. And afterwards, he just said, he was just so honest. He was like, I was carried. I was completely carried. Matthew Pinsent carried me. Like, he was just like, I shouldn't have won that gold. Like, Pinsent carried me to that last gold. And yeah, I get it. In an individual sport, it's just, oh my God, it's there. It's you. This man or woman used to be great and they're not anymore. And I'm watching it and it's horrible. But a team sport, like you say, they can have a very specific role and maybe you can sort of bow out with a bit more humility.
Yeah, and that's where things like, as you mentioned, doubles tennis, or you get senior tour, like we saw this week, that guy shooting 2 holes in one in a row on a golf course. Like, you can still have moments like that in like low pressure, like competitive level where everybody's falling to Father Time at that point, and then that becomes like a nice way to see people still succeed without putting them on that peak level of against the best in the world right now. You're not comparing like Tiger Woods to Scotty Scheffler. You're comparing Tiger Woods to the other 65-year-old guy that's also teeing off at that time. And maybe there's something in that for Andy Murray, or he'll go into broadcasting and get like £1 million deal with NBC or somebody when they do the US Open and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't want to see Murray push it too far, and I want to see the youngsters come through and have my attention focused on that rather than like the swan song of Andy Murray walking away again this whole week. Like, let's pay attention to the actual tennis. See what Emma Raducanu can do. I mean, she's back and she's relatively confident, it sounds like. And, you know, she said that she's had to step away and take a step back from tennis and winning the US Open at the age she did and the kind of pressure that came with that. She's kind of openly admitted that that was a lot for her to deal with. And now she's, from what, by all accounts, looking like she's getting not back to the peak of her powers, but certainly enjoying playing tennis more. And that's only a good thing for a pro athlete.
Yeah, she said she's back in love with the sport. And you know what? I mean, obviously, I've followed the kind of the criticism of her since the US Open. But Emma Raducanu owes people absolutely zero. Like, she won a slam. Like, she's in the microscopic percentage of professional female tennis players that have ever lived, and she won a slam. She'll always have that. She won a slam, and yeah, it was kind of a freak fortnight at the US Open when she was like, 18 or 19 or however old she was, and since then there've been injuries and that kind of thing. But she just owes people absolutely nothing. And also, just on a logical level, if you've got the choice between playing a WTA 250, like a WTA 250 in Guadalajara, or staying at home and doing a brand deal for 10 times the price, like screw your head on. Like, what do you think people are going to do? Do you think they're going to buy a house for her great granddaughter, or do you think she's going to mess around in Guadalajara at 250? Like, it's just a no-brainer. Yes, of course, you outside looking in, we want people to be absolutely devoted to the sport, etc., but there has to be just like a realism element of where the money is. And I'm not saying, by the way, that she's sacrificing tennis for sponsorship, but just think a little bit logically, people. Of course she's going to do that.
And what do you think her representatives are also encouraging her to do?
Of course.
I don't want to be the agent of somebody who's winning a £200,000 tournament when we can make 2.5 million off signing a new deal.
That's a bad agent.
Or whatever. Yeah.
An agent that's telling you to go and play, like the Singapore challenger, no, obviously not. An agent should be a shark that's rinsing you for every penny you've got. You should be holding back your agent and being like, whoa, that's a bit unethical, isn't it? You should be that side.
Where are you? Why have you got those cartoon dollar sign eyes that you only see in Looney Tunes? Why are you salivating so much?
It's another crate of champagne. What are we doing it? Yeah. So yeah, there's that. Just quickly to wrap up then on tell me what happened with the 2 holes in one. Obviously it wasn't back-to-back holes in one.
Yeah, back-to-back holes in one. Par 3, 2 in a row. And
wow, has that ever happened before?
62 million to 1 shot, I think it's something like that.
The second 62 million to 1, okay, to get back-to-back holes. This wasn't like a Kim Jong-un 18 holes in one.
This is on the senior tour. Frank Benzel Jr. makes back-to-back aces at the US Senior Open. Like, a big tournament on the senior tour as well. I mean, it's incredible. And I asked you, I think, on the WhatsApp, God, I couldn't sound more like I deserve to be on the senior tour.
Millennial.
On the WhatsApps. Yeah. I said, how many 147 breaks do you get back to back? I don't think I've ever heard that.
No.
So maybe a hole in one is easier and less of a kind of pinnacle of a sporting achievement than a 147.
What do we conclude on Not Another Sports Pod 1 that a 147 breaks harder?
I think so, yeah. I think so. But I think this might be the definitive proof. If somebody in a senior US Open can hit back-to-back aces, that might be the shining light that it's at least more likely to hit a hole in one than it is to hit a 147, which I think we did conclude anyway, because you have to think like six balls in advance on a 147 break, as opposed to a hole in one. You just hit it and hope, which is basically sums up most golfers' games anyway. Even the pros have to a little bit. So,
Ollie, back-to-back 147s have been recorded in professional snooker, but I believe not many. The first player to achieve it was Peter Ebdon, who made 147 breaks in consecutive frames during the 1992 Strachan Open qualifiers. And I think he might be the only person to do it, as far as I could see anyway. But anyway, it has been done. But yeah, I mean, just absurdly difficult.
We're not going to put this, by the way, on YouTube, but I wanted to finish with just the genius of Jonathan Pearce. Because there are some people that slag off commentators and all this kind of stuff. Jonathan Pearce gave us an anecdote midway through the Netherlands against Austria, kind of a few days after we did our last podcast, that sums up why being at a football tournament and being a member of the media and getting to go and experience being at the event as opposed to doing it off a TV screen in a studio in the back end of London somewhere, which is where so many sports commentaries kind of get done these days for numerous events all around the globe. Everybody views it and thinks, oh, Dave, were you off in China 3 days ago doing the tennis? No, I was like some little studio in Reading or something like that. You know what I mean? Like it happens. And the more that continues to happen, the more you lose little moments like this. And I love the confidence of an experienced commentator to sit here and talk about this moment that happened at the 1988 Euros. It shows why good commentators are good commentators, to have the balls to just reel off that anecdote, and why you should always try and be on site if you're in production or anything like that. Just a last scream before everybody takes it to streaming and remote from our own homes and doing commentary in our living room in our underpants at 2 o'clock in the morning and stuff. So I think I'll leave you with that visual image and the words of Jonathan Pearce, mate.
European Championship winning summer of '88, he scored a very late semi-final penalty against the Germans in Hamburg. So one of the most amazing pieces of policing in the ground in that game. There was an arced open area way to the left of the commentary position, where you can see a group of thugs moving through to try and get to another group of thugs. And down just behind the goal was a policeman with a Rottweiler, and they moved steadily towards each other, these rival groups of thugs. And all of a sudden he got a rag doll out of his pocket, the policeman. He let the dog off the lead, he threw the rag doll in the air. The dog leapt and tore the rag doll to pieces, and the rival fans watched it, saw it, turned and walked away from each other.
Intelligent hooligans.
It was just almost as a policeman saying, enough said, boys, yeah, exactly. Calm down. What a great team that was.